This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
M3 Radio in the mix.
It's time for Don't Tread on Me. Join MADDOG, Beachball, and Al as they talk about everything from politics to entertainment, only here on M3 Radio, starting now.
We're going to give you a quick video number 4. It's Beachball video number 4. This is the last part of, or at least part 3 of the comic book Pro Secrets Star Wars sex scandal. Ooh. So we're going to check that out, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to Spicy News. Filling in for Phil Schallberger, I'm Bobby Roberts, and these are this week's Hot Stories.
Star Wars fandom luminary Bobby Roberts is accused of sexual assault.
Well, the force is strong with Bobby Roberts.
If there's actually someone in Star Wars fandom who's a sexual assailant, please throw them under my car so I can be sure to cut ties. Bobby is the person accused. I don't have a last name, but he's been on Brian's show. Thanks, I can complete the puzzle from here. Fuck you, Bobby. Bobby said to me that he did something in his past that he needed to eat shit for publicly. He never revealed what that was, but apparently, we now know. Full of Sith podcast co-host Brian Young jumped to his defense. She falsely accused someone of being a convicted rapist with no proof and spread it around the community. The community. What community? What is this? What's going on? Alright, yeah. In this chapter, for a minute, let's allow the hapless, snake-bit sad sack that we've come to know as Brian Young to recede off into obscurity, off into the distance, off into triviality as we confront the macro of this whole thing, alright? And the macro is the diseased and malevolent, far left-wing extremists. You can call them SJWs if you want. You can call them NPCs if you want. Well, they've slithered their way into male-dominated hobbies, and they've set up shop. Suddenly, we're hearing about quote-unquote communities from colorful degenerates on the interwebs. Yeah, comics have a community. There's the Dungeons and Dragons community, the video games community, the Pokemon community, Warhammer 40K has one, Magic the Gathering has a community, and the Quartering, as far as I'm concerned, is the boss, Mayor Jeremy. There's Doctor Who, and then finally, Star Wars definitely has a community. I have discovered that in a very short period of time. Now, I've never been to Tatooine. A community to me just means a neighborhood. It's a group of people living together in one place, having particular characteristic in common, like old age or leprosy. Maybe they're practicing common ownership. If Star Wars has a community, what even is a community now? SJWs are slow to define it. Well, I'm not slow to define it. I'm quick. I'm speedy to define it. As it turns out, I'm part of a lot of communities, and that's why I'm confused. This term, communities, is very hip. It's kind of a catch-all phrase for anything that has to do with a collection of human beings. From the very tangible, like my skin color, my gender, my religion, my sexual preference, to the very abstract. It's a trendy term used in advertising, it's used in marketing and politics, and now it's used in social media managing. Because it alludes to more than just a transactional customer-company relationship, it implies warmth. There's warmth in a community, there's friendship, there are relationships in communities. A community is a group of people that care about each other. They feel they belong together. That's what a community should be. There are relationships, and they feel like they belong because people want to be loved. They don't want to be lonely. Everyone wants to belong somewhere. They want to say, these right here, these weirdos are my peers. This is my tribe. Together we have a shared identity. There's a group that goes beyond the individual. And because of this, it turns strangers into trusted peers. Communities become a part of our identity. So this is a very powerful phrase for SJWs to weaponize. Because when it comes to SJWs, there is no trust and there are no relationships. Communities have been weaponized. They collectivize fans into a group that has a common goal or purpose. And that's what these fan communities are. They're like project teams, they're like companies, they're like political movements or initiatives. They all seem to care about the same goal, but they're not communities in any real sense because they don't value relationships, as you'll see. So why does this matter right now? Why does it matter that far left wingers are invading pop culture hobbies, fandoms, and creating fake communities out of these fans? Why does that matter? Because ultimately, political movements, which is what these are, optimize for an external output. Okay? These fan communities are systematically policed by arrogant SJWs. And part of what they do is to ostracize and shun wrong thinkers. Thus, power hierarchies emerge from witch hunts, and lives can be destroyed over Star Wars. Real communities should optimize for something else: relationships and trust among themselves. But SJWs devour each other the moment it might signal their virtue to the pack. They aren't, and can never be, a real community. They're a mob. Star Wars Celebration is a big fan gathering to celebrate the Star Wars franchise. In April of 2017, it was held in beautiful sunny Orlando, Florida, but 2019 is going to be even bigger. It's coming to Chicago. And the boys of Rebel Force Radio are planning to be there, broadcast, meet fans and friends, and just have a good time. Well, at least they were planning on coming. It seems that SJW weirdos and the Star Wars fan community have mobilized to go after Rebel Force Radio sponsors and try to get them banned from next year's convention. Why? Well, apparently Jimmy Mack and Jason Swank have been saying that Star Wars is pandering to women and that Star Wars won't stop until they wipe men out of their movies. So true. They made comments about how they're sick of women being in lead roles and said things like, if Lucasfilm continues to pander to women, then sales will plummet because women are a minority in Star Wars fandom and men don't want to watch movies with women as leads. That's fine. Now, everything was perfectly okay and it all made sense until they criticized Andy Gutierrez, Lucasfilm rep, for taking a picture of herself drinking from this mug here, Fanboy Tears. Why is a Lucasfilm representative celebrating the pain of the customer? I really don't know. And yeah, I agree with them. I don't think that's appropriate behavior. But leading voices in the Star Wars fandom community disagreed. Here's Amanda Ward. Rebel Force Radio hits the podcast stage right after Black Girl Nerds. If that's not fucked up, I don't know what is. Here's the plan. God, I love this. We enjoy Black Girl Nerds podcast. Then we stick around to let Rebel Force Radio know exactly how unwelcome they are. Furthermore, someone needs to educate Star Wars Celebration on the disgusting, sexist behavior of these fans. So an alert is sent out to the SJW community. Guys, there's a woman asking for help. A woman is asking for help to protect women. Now, who will stand up and protect women? There's got to be some soy milk-fed gimp out there who will stand up for women. Sure enough, Bobby Roberts inboxed Rebel Force Radio to coax them to suicide? What is this? Like, your show is over now. You get one shot at making this right, and you're botching it hard. You can at least get a somewhat clean, apologetic, reticent exit. But this ain't it, man. Jim, talk to me. Let me help you out here. You guys are really botching this. Like, hard. Also, pretty sure Sam Witwer wouldn't appreciate the screen cap you guys just posted showing his private Facebook account. Maybe he would, I don't know, but that was also probably a bad call. Anyway, all the prior advice given still stands, most of which boils down to this. Why not just quit? This is bad for you. I don't mean as in you might not have a show, but as in this is harmful to you. All of it. There's no point in pursuing it further, is there? Aside from obstinance and spite, that is. You guys are both north of 40 and having the quality of your life legitimately hindered over a fake radio show about Star Wars. Like, think about that for a sec and really look at the absurdity of that 100% true statement. Your life is appreciably worse than it was 5 years ago because you can't stop doing this show that is providing you little to nothing in return, either financially or reputation-wise. What's the purpose in pursuing this expired run, guys? What do you think you're going to get out of it? What endgame justifies all this? What possible result makes all this worthwhile? The window where all this ends well closed long ago, guys. You can still like Star Wars without having a show, you know? Millions of people do it every day. Also, for what it's worth, I've never understood why you two go so hard at Jason Ward and Steele Saunders when it's super obvious. The two guys who really get under your skin are me and Brian, one of whom you don't acknowledge, and the other who still at least attempts talking directly to you. Me, it makes sense. I called you out repeatedly. I pulled out those receipts. I made them really public. I directly called for your sponsorships to end very recently. And then they did. So I get why you'd be mad at me. And yet the people who get the brunt of your ire are the Wards? Steele? I don't get it. It's really weird, frankly. Anyway, as per usual, I'm here waiting for one or both, but probably just one of you, to own your shit in even the slightest form. Is nobody else saying any of this to you, really? No one in your circle of friends or your immediate family is saying this? Just the guy you've never met? The one half of you keep stucking? The one whose transcriptions of your own words led to all this? That dude is the only one trying to legit talk sense into you despite a literal ton of reasons to do absolutely nothing for your benefit? That's wild if true. I can't imagine that it is, but man, I don't know what's worse, that it might be true or that it's not, and you're just ignoring everyone else too. Well, that says it all. Didn't you hear the 8-year-old in Daddy's clothes? Jason and Jimmy, you don't have a radio show anymore. Bobby Roberts says no radio show. But imagine the sociopathy of this dwarf to actually write all of those messages and send them to two people who weren't asking for them, demanding that they quit their livelihoods and their hobbies and move on. Because why? Because he's an SJW, something, social justice warrior, whamminhood. Worse, imagine that kind of persuasive abuse being directed at a young woman in Star Wars fandom who thinks that Bobby Roberts actually is someone, that Bobby Roberts is a big boy in Star Wars. Imagine what he could do. Imagine what he could get away with for a while. Incidentally, Star Wars Celebration has a zero-tolerance policy for, quote, harassment of any kind. No harassment. Now, if what Bobby Roberts did to Rebel Force Radio and what Amanda Ward and her weirdo friends were planning on doing to Rebel Force Radio as they tried to put on a panel doesn't qualify as harassment, what the hell does? Yes, indeed. SJW fandom communities. Like floating garbage islands. Tight groupings of discarded filth clinging together somewhere in the Pacific by mutual decay and gravity. There's perceived safety in the community, though. That's the thing. There's power. Organized and targeted harassment campaigns against Republicans or just any dissenters can effectively be launched. And if necessary, they'll cover for them and disguise these campaigns. Plans are made and carried out, but often they'll police and destroy their own publicly, and that's the thing. It's a warning to others within their own ranks to never, ever, ever fall out, never disobey the rules. Unpersoning or canceling each other is a hip display of their own power. They call it canceling. They'll say, "Hey, that dude's canceled." That means that they're never going to acknowledge their existence again, and they're going to try to destroy their lives. It's wonderful. Disagreements like that can lead to catastrophic, life-ruining whisper networks that will turn allies. And they don't have friends. None of them. SJWs do not have friends. They have allies. All right? So they'll turn their allies against you and encourage others to up the ante of crazy accusations and allegations for virtue signal points. And you'll see people get more and more insane and say more crazy, hateful things in order to get pats on the head. Now, this is the thing. That's part of being in the SJW fandom community, but these people ask for it. The rules that they espouse for themselves they're unfair and impossible to live by. Bobby Roberts is the latest to discover this. But did Bobby Roberts sexually assault someone? It's hard to say. From what I can put together, the initial accusations were made on behalf of anonymous victims 2 years ago by a woman named Maya. Now, Maya has nuked her Twitter timeline from about 3 months all the way back. So those tweets are missing, and I can't see the initial accusations. I can't find them. But what I can do is put together people talking, the community, talking about those accusations. And Maya does indeed still reiterate her initial accusations. So let's have a look at this. This tweet contains some backstory. It says, the public part of this is what? 2 to 3 years old concerning Bobby? Okay, so these initial allegations were 2 to 3 years old. Gets narrowed down to 2 years. And then he says, this got brought up again because of Jason, that's Jason Ward of Star Making Wars, or Making Star Wars, with the Maya, there's Maya, and Steele also works for Star Making Wars, comments, and Brian Young, stepping in. And that was when Brian Young stepped in to say, I don't believe these accusations. Okay, so then he goes on to say, for Jason to come back to this and open this can after just apologizing, and Brian too, why? And then there's this other tweet here, which further points out why these accusations resurfaced again after 2 years. And it says, it all started when Jason Ward, decided to dismiss the concerns of women of color. Oh, Jason never dismissed the concerns of women of color. And use abusive language towards people who defended us. This encapsulates it. But now, there's more going on. Jason Ward had dismissed the concerns of women of color right after this tweet. It goes like this. LOL, I've personally experienced Steele being an ally while dismissing the concerns of marginalized folk. My God, I don't know how you can be an SJW. I really don't know. Let me get back to this. And you, a man, angrily demanding a group of women respect another man whose behavior they find problematic is really something. And Jason just comes back with, fuck off. That did it. That's the problem right there. Alright, so this right here is fascinating. This is Amanda Ward. She's Jason Ward's wife. You remember her as the person trying to start the harassment campaign against Rebel Force Radio, should they appear at Star Wars Celebration. And she tweets out, no, the public part was the other day when Brian Young associated Bobby's name with rape. Everything before that was rumor and chatter. Not sure what you're talking about in that respect. And then that's answered by this fellow J-Red who says, he was talking about a Twitter thread from Maya from like 2 years ago where she incorrectly said Bobby was a convicted rapist as proof she is untrustworthy. Saf corrected him, and while not convicted of a crime, he did assault someone and she knows the victim. Unbelievable. Okay, so let's go over this. Bobby, people have been whispering about him having assaulted a young lady for years, but the general public wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for Bobby's idiotic friend Brian Young, who actually, as a way of discrediting a young woman named Maya here and saying Maya doesn't know what she's talking about, she called my friend Bobby a convicted rapist, and Bobby's never been convicted of rape. What that ended up doing is bringing these allegations to the forefront, and people were able to say, including some other young women in the community, yeah, he wasn't convicted, but we know his victims. So Brian Young is a moron, officially. I think that should go on the record now. Brian Young is a dummy. Some friend, Bobby. So wait a second, there's a known victim of Bobby Roberts? There's a young lady out there who's been sexually assaulted by this man? I want to know more. I want to call the police. I want to do something about this. I want evidence. But no, the community is telling me that I don't deserve to know. Nobody deserves to know anyone's trauma if they don't want to share it. I guess that. Does that sound right? This is a man's life and reputation we're talking about here. Not to mention justice for a young victim, possibly. What? But then SJW Bobby, in his own words from a year ago, puts me in my place. He says, quote, let's wait for the facts, equals let's see if anything mitigates this awfulness and lets him, and by proxy us, off the hook here. Well, okay. I'm not the one being accused of sexual assault, but, all right. And here comes Feminist Nerd. She says, let's get one thing straight. Semi-Rose, that's Maya, didn't start or spread anything. If accusations existed, they fucking existed because of behavior. I'm not going to sit here and let her take the fall for the terrible actions of men in this community. Nor should you. Police that community. And here's another young woman. She says, yep, she hasn't said anything that I've not heard before from several different sources or, in some cases, seen. But men are always going to close ranks and protect themselves rather than actually listen, so I don't know why I'm surprised. Now, wait a second. I'm not going to close ranks to protect Bobby Roberts. Just tell me something. Show me some evidence. Who's the victim? I want to help. I want to protect her. But then Bobby Roberts' own words shut me the F up. He said, it's this simple. Dudes want extreme due diligence and infinite time to, quote, weigh the facts, because we've got our own shit to answer for. Again, okay. I'm not the one being accused here. It's you. All right, no, if that's how you want it. And then here comes the collateral damage. This guy Tim Owens says, I can only speak to what I've seen personally, but what I've seen is that this week, two front-facing Star Wars fandom luminaries, Jason Ward and Brian Young, treated serious, apparently long-standing claims against their colleagues with overt derision and dismissiveness. I agree. Now, we've already examined Brian Young pretty thoroughly. Let's take a quick side road into exploring the world of Jason Ward and star-making wars, won't we? Let's go.
We're back. I hope you enjoyed part 3 of the documentary. You really go, like I said before, go out of your way. Comic Book Pro Secrets, go and like and share and subscribe. Oh, here we go. SCOTUS agrees to hear the case that may ultimately undermine ATF power. This is from December 11th by Tom Knighton, and I didn't put the link. Anyway, one of the biggest problems with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, don't forget the E, isn't that it enforces a law. I mean, it exists explicitly for that purpose, so that's kind of what it's supposed to be doing. No, the biggest problem is in the addition to enforcing those rules, it also gets to make them as it goes. The ATF...
Now, yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about the fact that we've got pistol braces for AR pattern rifles now, and they've actually expanded it to AK pattern rifles. Mm-hmm. And that had to be sent to ATF for an approval, even though there's no law that actually governs such a thing. There's nothing in legislation that says a brace for a pistol is illegal or legal. Yet we have to send it to an agency for them to say, oh, yes, we say it's okay. And nobody sees a problem with that.
Yeah,
Bump stocks were sent to ATF to get approval. And they were approved during the Obama administration. As far as I'm concerned, no big deal. I don't really care. I used one once. They're fun. But it's something that doesn't exist within the law. There's no legislation that exists governing something like a bump stock. Why do I need a government agency to tell me whether it's legal or illegal?
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the rules and the laws that we follow are simply created by unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, bureaucratic fiat.
The ATF is also tasked by Congress to interpret the law and create regulatory policies on the subject that it can get to turn around and enforce. It doesn't take a rock. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's where the biggest problem really came from. Congress has loved delegating its own authority, its legislative authority, off to regulatory agencies so they don't have to make laws, so they don't have to get involved in these things, and so they can remain blameless, and they don't have to answer uncomfortable questions to their voters. They hand it off to a regulatory agency so they can keep their hands clean.
Are you a rocket scientist?
I've built a rocket or two.
Okay. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see this, to see all the many ways it creates problems. Then top it off with the fact that the courts have taken the hands-off approach to this, known as Auer and Chevron deference. And you have a disaster in the making. However, it seems that there's a chance that those days are numbered. Recently, there has been a push from some quarters to reconsider Auer's deference, Chevron's deference, and other aspects of the modern administrative law state, and overturn them as being inherently unconstitutional. Specifically, that such deference to bureaucratic decisions violates the required separation of powers.
There you go.
Were that to
continue, I'll get into this in a minute.
Okay. Were that to happen, the current administrative state would be rocked to its core. While there has been some rumblings from the Justice Thomas and others in this regard, there did not appear to be a majority on the Supreme Court interested in potentially unleashing this kind of political earthquake. Scalia and Kennedy were, at best, squishy on the issue. Today, however, the Supreme Court granted cert in the case Kinzer and Wilkie that specifically changes whether our deference is constitutional. With the addition of Justice Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, both of whom have expressed reservation about the current state of the administrative law, there may now be the 5 votes needed to begin the undo of decades-long abdication of power to the vast federal bureaucracy, including the BATFE. Keep your eyes on this one. Okay, go ahead.
Well, as you were saying, keeping your eyes on this one is a good one, but the fact is, this may not limit its footprint to just guns and regulations regarding them. This could shake up the entire establishment of using regulatory agencies to basically perform the duties of legislatures. This could take the EPA and turn it on its head, because all of a sudden now they can't. If this goes through, if the Supremes decide on this and say, yeah, this deference never really was warranted, legislators should be doing what they're supposed to do, legislate on these issues, and not hand over their duties to hand over the duties of the legislative branch to an executive branch agency, then, well, you can't really let EPA or other regulatory agencies take the lead on things like that either, can you?
The IRS?
IRS is more of an enforcement wing, enforcement and collection. I don't know if that one would fall under it, but that's a hot take. I don't know where that one's going to go yet, so I'm not going to take a hard stand on that one. But we know EPA is regulatory, and we know EPA makes shit up as they go along.
Absolutely.
And any other agency out there that makes shit up as they go along, this case could knock all of that over. That's how big this is. Could this be tremendous for gun owners and the entire Second Amendment community? You betcha.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It could end up shaking the entire freaking DC establishment. It's that big.
Well, keep your eye on this one. The case could eventually do more for gun owners than any case since Heller, and indeed could be one of the most important Supreme Court cases in recent history. Pretty much going along with what you said. This is a good thing for all of us, because our deference specifically keeps the courts from calling down regulatory bodies overstepping their bounds unless they are particularly, help me with this word,
egregious.
Things like that, like the ATF potentially declaring things like bump stock as machine guns, despite them not having anything to do with how many rounds can be fired with a single pull of the trigger.
Mm-hmm. And with the upcoming regulation that's supposed to be coming out of Department of Justice regarding this, I'm just imagining that somebody's going to end up taking that to court simply because you can't fit device that slides back and forth and makes your finger pull the trigger for every individual shot fit into the language of 1934's National Firearms Act.
That's why they're going after fully semi-automatic weapons, right?
Well, they're going after semi-automatic weapons because us having weapons of militia utility might actually make us realize one day we can stand up.
The courts have routinely allowed bureaucrats to do pretty much whatever they want, and as a result, we have unelected officials who are unable to challenge federal law with a stroke of the pen. There's no way they should ever be allowed to happen in this country. If the court case overturns our deference, then the ATF needs to take a step back and recognize that it isn't going to get away with just passing new rules. It had to stick to the mandate handed down by Congress. It would sure be nice change of pace. So I got a quick video here. It's 16 minutes. It's, I Shall Not Comply with Coffee with Craig from Firearms Policy Coalition.
I love Craig.
Have you heard this particular video, the I Shall Not Comply?
No, I haven't seen this one, but I mean, most mornings I catch his Coffee with Craig videos on Facebook. Cool.
Well, then I Shall Not Comply gives you all the do's and don'ts and the ins and outs of taking that stance. I think it's really important for our listeners who are, in fact, gun owners and maybe starting to, push against the up-and-coming laws and some of the laws that have already been passed. So, check out this video, for Beach Balls, video number 5, and we'll be right back.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, politics, culture, movies, you name it. We're talking about it right here, all Second Amendment, all the time on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share this program, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. Also, feel free, if you just want to listen to us, check us out at Apple Podcasts, Apple iTunes, Google Podcast, and Spotify, multiple different places where you can listen to the audio version of Coffee with Craig, and encourage your friends to do the same. Also, make it a point, go to fpcgear.com, fpcgear.com. It is a very cool place where you can go and you can find T-shirts, you can find hoodies, you can find coffee mugs, all things to help you promote your support of the Second Amendment while actually supporting the Second Amendment, because every dollar that you spend there goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. fpcgear.com. Support the Second Amendment and look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. Now, here we are. New Year's going to be coming around, and in multiple places there will likely be new laws that will be starting to take effect relating to the Second Amendment and other things, but also in relating to the Second Amendment. But one of the things that's actually become quite interesting is this direction where people are going when it comes to the issue of compliance with the law. This phenomenon that we're seeing, that normal law-abiding citizens are deciding that they are simply not going to – they're just going to ignore the law. There was Prop 63 was a bill that passed here in the state of California, and I remember there was the head of the Assistant District Attorneys Association was testifying, and she basically said that, if the government keeps passing laws – that are nonsensical, that they believe are just stupid laws. Not my word, not hers, but in essence, that's what she said. I'm paraphrasing. That eventually what you're going to do is you're going to breed contempt for government and noncompliance because people are simply going to ignore the law. Well, guess what's starting to happen in the city of Boulder? Boulder, Colorado, they actually passed an assault weapons ban, a ban dealing with semi-automatic centerfire rifles, as well as magazines, firearms that have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Well, not only in Boulder have they decided that. Well, the first thing that they decided was that they were going to sue. And, here, there's a video clip that I found of when they were talking about suing. And I want you to watch this and also kind of give you an idea of where the people of Boulder are coming from on this particular measure.
It's not just about the Second Amendment. It's about our First Amendment rights to assemble, for gun owners to be able to say, I've got this gun and I'm going to the range and I'm using it with others. It's about the Fourth Amendment. It's about our right for privacy. It's about taking a property, saying you need to give up what you own. You can't buy anymore.
The ordinance also requires assault weapon owners who have been grandfathered in to register their weapons with police by the end of the year. If they fail to comply, they would have to turn the weapons in.
A lot of laws like this are difficult to enforce because it's really the law ends up targeting folks that are law-abiding.
Legal expert Douglas Richards says it will also be tough to police.
How does law enforcement start enforcing a law like this? I mean, what do they kick in doors and check to see if everybody has a firearm or something that falls within this ban?
Boulder police wouldn't comment on how they plan to enforce the law. They say they're still figuring that out. Richards say the lawsuit could stand a chance to win if it's able to prove the ordinance is a case of government overreach.
Municipalities are free to pass laws and ordinances that they feel are going to protect their citizens, but a municipality or a city or a county cannot pass a law or an ordinance that's going to violate your state or federal constitutional rights.
So what they're noting here is, once again, they see this beyond just the Second Amendment. They see this as a violation of putting forth a law that violates your rights in many different areas. And so in many cases, what they're starting to find is people are simply not complying. In fact, in the city of Boulder, they've had less than 100 people have actually come forward and registered their quote-unquote assault weapons. Less than 100 in a city the size of Boulder. And here's what's happening. Folks are simply deciding that, like he was saying, this is almost impossible to enforce because you're in essence criminalizing otherwise law-abiding citizens. So these are people that 9 times out of 10 law enforcement is not going to have any contact with. They're not going to be going in. They're not going to be able to go and kick in doors. It's not like they're going to know what who's got these things. We're going to start going after them. No, that's what they want the registration for. See, once they get them to register it, well, then they know exactly where to go. So then that is how you enforce this law because they now have registered. So they know exactly where to go. It's funny. A guy I knew who was running for Congress, he had actually immigrated here from the Soviet Union, from Russia at the time. And what he had noted was when the communists came in to Russia, they came in and the first thing that they did was they said, we need to know who has firearms, and it's, for the good of the party. Then they said, okay, once they knew who had them, then they said, we need to now confiscate those firearms for the good of the party. And then they said, now we need to confiscate your private property. We need to confiscate your land. We need to confiscate your business for the good of the party. See, that's what they do. That's the reason why once you disarm a citizenry. So people are basically, once again, otherwise law-abiding citizens are simply deciding we shall not comply. That's what's happening in the city of Boulder. People have decided that, you know what? Screw them. No, we're not going to come and register our firearms. We're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you what we've got. We're not going to tell you. We're just not going to do it because it is a stupid law. Now, but they're not the only ones. In New Jersey, back in February, when they put in their bump stock bans, interesting thing happened. They got one, maybe 2 bump stocks were turned in. In other words, people in the entire state, people were basically saying, yeah, no, I'm even if I have a bump stock, I'm not turning it in because you are not going to just take away my property. They're saying, sorry. I've violated no law by owning this. I've violated no law with this bump stock. So, yeah, no, I'm not going to turn it in. Screw you. Right? But once again, that's not the only place where this is occurring. Take in New York. And in New York, and with the SAFE Act, they are reporting massive non-compliance with either registering or with the magazine capacity. They are literally finding that just basically people are flat out ignoring the SAFE Act. They're just ignoring it because they're saying our rights and our personal defense is more important, is more relevant, quite frankly, than your right to feel safe. It's not really about a right to feel safe. We all know when it comes to government, it's more about a right to take away. It's more about a right to control you. And they know that if you have no means of self-defense, then they know that they have the ability to control you. So in New York, it's happening. In California, with the magazine ban. Now, keep in mind, there's been a magazine ban in place in the state of California since 91. I mean, it's been a long time. The magazine ban, the magazine ban's been in place in California, and yet California is awash in magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Because once again, people are saying this is stupid. No, you are not going to take away my lawfully purchased property. No, you are not going to. When I know that a criminal can walk in my house with a 30-round magazine or a 100-round drum, you are not going to limit me to 10 rounds. That's what once again, what law-abiding citizens are saying. Let me clarify. Otherwise, law-abiding citizens are saying, no, this is a stupid law. I will not comply with it. And then there's the recent bullet button ban here in the state of California. We estimate there's basically probably about 3% compliance, meaning of all of the firearms, of all the semi-automatic centerfire rifles that had bullet buttons that were purchased in the last few years. I mean, we're talking well over 1 million. About less than 60,000 were actually registered or attempted to register. What happened to the rest of them? Did they all go? Did everyone decide that they're going to go featureless? Did everyone decide that they're going to use one of the workarounds? Or are some people just telling the government, screw you? Because see, here's the thing, folks. They're not going. Let me just say this before we get into this whole thing. Let me just say this: I'm not advocating for non-compliance. I understand if that's what you choose to do. Some of us are, who are in particular in this thing, are a little bit kind of high profile. I comply with the law because, well, I know that if there's someone that they have if they have a chance to go after someone like me, they will. So anyway. But I'm not advocating for it. But one of the things that you got to understand that I try to explain to some of these lawmakers is that most of these laws are unenforceable unless you are going to go door to door, knocking on people's doors and start confiscating firearms and start searching their homes. I mean, think about it. That's one of the things that's starting to happen with this assault weapon registry. You send pictures of your firearm, it's got something kind of hinky, and they send agents out to your home or to your place of business to inspect your firearm and possibly confiscate it. That's the only way that they can enforce this. Otherwise, what winds up happening is that they wind up enforcing it as you have casual encounters with law enforcement. Now, the interesting thing about that is that now we're talking about selective enforcement. We're talking about the idea that only certain people are going to have this enforced against them. We're talking about people who tend to have more interactions with law enforcement. Low-income communities are going to wind up having this law enforced against them even more. Young black and brown men are going to wind up having this law enforced against them even more. Not saying that they're trying to be racist, but I'm just saying that's who winds up having these casual interactions with law enforcement more than that's who does it the most. So that's one thing, is understand that compliance, enforcement is going to be an issue. And that's why people are saying, fine, whatever. Now, with that, let me just be real with you. Those of you who decide that you are not going to comply, I appreciate your spirit. I am down with that. I hear what you're saying. But understand and make sure that if you are not going to comply, that you fully understand what that means and what the legal ramifications of noncompliance are. Because understand that it doesn't just affect you. If you are married, it affects your spouse. If you have children, it affects your children. Because you could wind up doing jail time. You could wind up having to spend money you don't have on an attorney. Right? You could wind up going through a whole bunch of stuff. And if you're lucky, all that will happen to you is your firearms will be confiscated, and you'll lose hundreds, if not thousands. I'm guessing if you're watching this, I'm going to guess into the thousands of dollars, and your private property could potentially wind up being gone. I'm just saying. So know those ramifications. Know what happens if you have a felony conviction on your record and how that might impact you. Know and understand that. So if you're going to not comply, then at least you know what you're getting yourself into. That's just one point that I want to make. The other thing is, and I get, some of y'all think that the internet is all anonymous and you're going to write, and you write in the comments on all these, I'm not going to comply, come and take them, yada, yada, yada. Understand this also. Our allies are not the only ones that pay attention to what goes on here. They're not the only ones watching. I know for a fact there are people at California DOJ that watch Coffee with Craig. I know it. All right. But I say that to tell you that when you decide that's what you're going to write, you put a nice big target on yourself. I'm just warning you. Look, because I care about y'all. You guys are the reason that Coffee with Craig and the Firearms Policy Coalition, you're the reason that we exist. We can't do what we do. We don't do what we do without you. So, but we want to make sure, just like we make sure that California legislators, just like we make sure when we go and we talk to them, that they understand that, or at least that we try to inform them about all the consequences of the stupid laws that they try to pass. We want them to understand the ramifications of that. I also want you to understand the ramifications of the decisions that you make, whether it's compliance or register or choosing to go ahead and register your firearms, whatever it is. We want to make sure you understand the ramifications of either compliance with California law or federal law or whatever state you're in, and also understand the consequences of non-compliance so that you can make an informed decision. But understand this, and for those who are watching this who are not of the pro-Second Amendment persuasion, understand that, yes, non-compliance is a thing. And understand that the more laws you pass, the more people are not going to comply. The more laws you pass violating our free speech rights, violating our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, violating our private property rights, violating our due process rights, violating just about every single right that we have. Just as you break the Constitution and separation of powers in order to pass things like bump stock bans, understand or to redefine firearms and firearm parts, to remake up terms and ignore the legal process in order to take away our rights, understand that people are simply not going to comply. And on top of not complying, people are going to get pissed off. And getting pissed off, well, anyway, I'll let you figure it out from there. But understand that, yes, non-compliance, I shall not comply. Yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. I very much appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you guys liking and sharing this program, telling others about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.
we're back. Back here at D-Tom. I'm MADDOG, and I got Trooper Sam with me.
Hey.
Yeah, we're back. California's background check law had no impact on gun deaths, according to John Hopkins study. This is by John Miltonmore, and it's from fees.org. A new academic study has found once again gun laws are not having their desired effect. So let's take it real quick. What would you think? John Hopkins is very pro right wing or something? I mean, we have to get that out of the way.
Well, I mean, obviously we know that they're going to come down on the advocacy side of this equation rather than actual science. But even so, they're right. It didn't work.
I used to smoke weed with a Johnny Hopkins.
Well, there's an A side for you.
That's a Step Brothers reference. You didn't know Johnny Hopkins.
But I mean,
a joint study conducted by. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will get into it. I want you to read through this first.
A joint study conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the University of California at Davis Violence Prevention Research Program found that California's much-touted mandate background checks had no impact on gun deaths, as researchers puzzled to as why. California gun laws are a failure. In 1991, California simultaneously imposed comprehensive background checks for firearm sales and prohibited gun sales and gun possessions to people convicted of misdemeanor violent crimes. The legislation mandated that all gun sales, including private transactions, would have to go through California licensed federal firearms licensee dealers. Shotguns, rifles, like handguns, became subject to a 15-day waiting period to make certain all gun purchasers had undergone a thorough background check. More than a quarter of a century later, researchers at Johns Hopkins and UC Davis dug into the results of the sweeping legislation. It was the most expensive state gun control legislation in America, affecting an estimated 1 million gun buyers in the first year alone. Though costly and cumbersome, politicians and law enforcement agreed that the law was worth it. The legislation would keep more guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, said then Republican Governor George, how do you say this guy's name?
Duke Majan.
Duke Majan. That was before I was here, huh?
Yeah. This is before you were still a Jersey boy back then.
Schwarzenegger, but I'm surprised to see a Republican governor.
This used to be kind of a red stronghold at one time.
I think the new laws are going to help counter the violence, said LAPD spokesman William D. Booth. More than a quarter of a century later, researchers at Johns Hopkins and UC Davis dug into the results of sweeping legislation. Researchers compared yearly gun suicide and homicide rates over the 10 years following implementation of California's law with the 32 control states that did not have such laws. They found no change in the rates of either cause of death from firearms from 2000. The findings, which run counter to experiences in Missouri and Connecticut that did, show a link between background checks and gun deaths appear to have startled the researchers. Ooh. Garen Wintmute, the UC Davis professor of emergency medicine and senior author of the study, said the incomplete data and flawed criminal record reporting might explain the results. Wintermute noted, in 1990, only 25% of criminal records were accessible in the primary federal database used for background checks, and centralized records of mental health prohibitions were almost non-existent. As a result, researchers said as many as 1 in 4 gun buyers may have purchased a firearm without undergoing a background check. We know that the individual level of comprehensive background check policies work, that they prevent future firearm violence at this level, says Nicole Kravitz-Wirtz, a researcher who led the survey. Everyone has confirmed bias, even experts. everyone has confirmation bias, even experts. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the findings, which run counter to the conventional wisdom that gun control saves lives, have received almost no media attention. An exception was the Washington Post, which cited the study buried 20 paragraphs down in the article in which the American Medical Association calls for stronger gun control laws at the state level. The AMA President Barbara McInerney told the Post in an interview, "We see an epidemic and public health crisis. We think intervening as early as possible is smarter than just building a more intensive care units for people who are either killed or damaged by a badly hurt by violence." Bizarrely, the Post cited the Johns Hopkins D.C. Davis study as evidence that what the AMA is calling for may be needed. Apparently, the Washington Post, California's failure to effectively enforce background checks had no discernible impact in gun deaths and is evidence that more gun control laws are needed. Essentially, the study authors that the AMA and the Post appear incapable of seriously entertaining the possibilities that sweeping gun control legislation might not have produced the results desired and expected fewer deaths. We should judge by outcomes, not intentions. Alice, the experts are behaving exactly as expected. More than a decade ago, the writer Louis Menard in the New York article explained that rationalization experts make when their theories fail to hold up in the real-world laboratory. When they're wrong, experts are rarely held accountable, and they rarely admit it either. They insist they were just off on timing or blindsided by an improbable event, or almost right, or wrong for the right reasons. They have the same repertoire of self-justification that everyone has, and they are no more inclined than anyone else in their revise their beliefs about the way the world works or ought to work, just because they made a mistake. California failed gun control laws appear to be yet another example of experts, to quote the great Milton Friedman, judging policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. Despite the dismal record of gun control, expect the media and experts to use a repertoire of self-justification rather than modify their beliefs, regardless of what the evidence shows. Are you still there?
Alrighty then. Yeah, I'm still here now.
Sorry,
let's go back to. Well, it was a long article, had a lot of bullet points, but let's go back to Garen Wintemute. Do you know who he is?
I have no idea.
Garen Wintemute, as they said, he's in charge of an emergency medical department, things like that. He's also the one who, in the 2016 law that Jerry Brown signed, creating the University of California Firearm Violence Research Center.
Oh.
He's the guy that pushed for that law, so that would be funded and created, and he was put in charge of it. And by the way, guess what else that law says? That whatever studies that center does, they don't have to share them with anybody else, say like a pro-gun organization that wants to examine the data to see if the conclusions might not be correct.
Of course it does.
By law, California law, they don't have to share it. They're funded with public money, but they get to be as completely untransparent as they like. And Garen Wintemute is absolutely about gun control advocacy. Doesn't matter about what the evidence is. He's not in this for the science. He's in this because he's got a practically religious devotion to the idea of gun control.
Well, when you create a special department that's funded by state government, your job is to keep that going at all costs. So if you find a reason for whatever your department, your commission doesn't need to exist anymore, well, you do things to make sure that it exists. So you can.
This guy isn't just the guy trying to keep that going. This is the guy who built it. This is the guy who convinced Jerry Brown. This is what we need. This is his baby. And this study is his baby. So I'm actually kind of surprised we're getting this actually hit the light of day, honestly, because this is just the sort of thing Garen would normally, sweep under the rug. Nobody saw this. But it got out. What can I say? So what do you think the holes are that anti-gun people are shooting through this one?
I'm stunned. I'm not sure.
Well, how about this? California has these laws, but we've got Idaho, Nevada, and Arizona right next door. Hey, people can go get a gun right over there. We should have federal gun control laws that are strong so we don't have that kind of problem, even though maybe 4% of criminal guns come from out of state. Maybe.
Is that what the how many criminal guns were delivered to Mexico from Eric Holder?
Yeah, but still, kind of an unrelated point on this one. We're just talking about where are California criminals, people who are actually causing harm, where are they getting their guns from? By and large, they're getting them right here in California.
I honestly believe that people who are criminals, who go out of their way to get guns to do crime, get their guns illegally, probably right through the border.
Honestly, they don't have to. It's easy enough to get them in-state. Stolen guns, straw-purchased guns, what have you. It's not that hard for a California criminal to get their hands on a gun.
I'm just saying, for the types of guns that are used in crimes, when you see criminal, a guy who's a career criminal, not somebody who screws up, they bought a gun and they do something stupid, they pull it out and they do something stupid, now they're a criminal. Somebody who believes their career is stealing and shooting people and dealing drugs. I don't believe that they get their guns from legal sources at all. And
let's face it.
And I do believe
any gun that is transferred to somebody, let's say, number one, we're talking to somebody who's a convicted criminal, either a felony or a misdemeanor punishable by more than 1 year in prison, that's already disqualified from carrying a gun, from possessing a firearm.
Absolutely.
Any transfer method at all is illegal to them. And you know what straw purchases are, right?
Right.
Well, straw purchases are probably the single largest way that those very criminals are getting guns. They get guns from people who have clean records, and those people, either they profit from it by selling them for a little bit extra, or they get the baby mamas, whatever, who have a clean record to go to a gun store and say, "Yeah, pick me up this, honey."
That's true. Absolutely.
And that happens all the time.
They use the baby mama to do a lot of things too. I see it a lot.
Straw purchasing is the single largest way that people who should not have guns get guns.
Yep.
And I'm trying to bring up some data now on how many of the guns from out of state come into California. But as I recall, the number was less than 10%. And I just can't find the data that I was looking for on that right now. Let's see. What else did I want to hit? You already read in the article about how they're saying, well, this failure just says we just need stronger gun laws, although they can't really state what those stronger gun laws should be. They talk about registration without ever being able to explain how registration would ever prevent a crime.
Well, if the background check if it works like designed, that person would never be able to buy any type of gun. So
yeah, but background checks only work when you actually use them on the end user. And criminals, by their very nature, are avoiding the background checks entirely. They're sidestepping them because they can.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if, I mean, we live in California. California has required universal background checks for a very long time. That doesn't stop people who really want them from getting them, and without a background check. All they're doing is inhibiting your ability and my ability to get a firearm.
Do you know what weenie is?
What is?
Weenie.
That doesn't sound familiar, so I'm going to say no.
So weenie is a new social media.
Oh.
And, we're going to wrap.
Wait a minute. I know what you're talking about. You got that written wrong somehow. I think it's MeWe.
Oh, is it MeWe? Am I mixing it up?
Yeah.
My bad. MeWe. Yeah, I do have it.
Yeah.
So MeWe.
Let me make sure that I'm not talking out my ass here.
To replace Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter with all the bullshit going on with with all the social media stuff out there, being socialist media. Libertarians came together and created MeWe, which is this social media platform. And I just want to go through, before we wrap up the show, I just want to go through the Privacy Bill of Rights. We are uncompromising about trust, respect, and integrity. You own your personal information and content. It is explicitly not ours. You will never receive a targeted advertisement or third-party consent based on what you do or say online. We think that's creepy. You will you see every post in timeline order from your friends, family, and groups. We do not manipulate, filter, or change the order of your content or what you see. Permissions and privacies are your rights. You control them. You control who can access your content. You control what, if anything, others can see in members' searches. Your privacy means we do not share your personal information with anyone. Your emojis are for you and your friends. We do not monitor or mine your data. Your face is your business. We do not use facial recognition technology. You have the right to delete your account and take your content with you at any time. Isn't that just a breath of fresh air?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Lord knows, just about anything you actually put up on Bookface, it ends up becoming Zuck's property to be used for whatever. And
I'll stage that in his congressional hearing when he decided it wasn't a platform.
True enough. Although he's still treating it much like one.
Well, I mean, I've been telling people that we need to. So look, what do you think would happen? And not everybody, but let's say like 20% of Facebook decided to just bounce. All of a sudden, tomorrow, all together left.
Could you say MySpace?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, here's the thing.
They rely on their advertisement.
Eventually, that's going to happen. There is no forever in technology. There is no forever in any technology company. Eventually, we walk away for whatever reason. And Facebook is not forever. Now, Zuck, I'll give him credit for this. He's trying to cash in on this as much as possible in the time that it exists.
Well,
because he knows this is not forever. He knows this won't last.
Well, I think what we should do as a group is make our movement to do it all together at once. You know, what you do is when you pull yourself off of Tumblr, Facebook, I throw a Tumblr in there, not because I really use it, but I know that there's a whole thing with adult content that's going on right now. They're removing all.
Yeah, which means like nobody's looking at it now.
Right. I think that's the only like reason for I think people even use it for. But
press F for respect, bro.
Yeah. But if we can get a 20%. Where 20% of the folks on Facebook and Twitter just decided to leave, I think that it would collapse on its weight. I think that'll probably happen about the same time that Amazon gets a big run on yellow vests. Well, we got to support our the French. Like, who thought that they would be the ones to fucking lose their shit first?
Oh, dude, I never thought the French were going to make me, as a Californian, feel like a complete pussy. But here I am. I'm hanging my head in shame because Parisians are way more badass than I am.
Have you noticed that nobody's arguing with the government of France gassing children?
No, I've seen that. Orange man bad.
All right. So we got one last video for you, or maybe, I don't know, maybe this might be too long. We might have pushed it a little too long, but it's 14 and a half minutes. De Souza absolutely destroys leftist college student. Check it out. Sam, where can they find you?
Well, I kind of changed my Twitter name now. You can find me at Godwin Meter on Twitter. I am no longer Trooper Sam or whatever the heck I was before. Look for Godwin Meter.
You can always write into the show at maddogdtom@yahoo.com. For Don't Tread on Me, for Beach Ball, for Al, for Trooper Sam, we are out. Have a good day.
After World War II, the white middle class soared to prosperity as a result of bills like the GI Bill. And African Americans who were coming home from war didn't get those benefits simply because they were African American. The U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs denied African Americans access to those benefits simply because of their race. And you are correct in saying that no one today dealt with that particular issue. With that being said, however, there was wealth amassed as a result of those programs that still exists today. And when I think of your example about an individual who works as a janitor and sees people dining in a beautiful cafe walking home from work, I want to ask you, do you think any of that indignation, given certain circumstances, might actually be justified simply because there have been systematic blocks in people's way throughout American history, not ending with slavery, not ending with the Jim Crow laws, not ending, some would say even today, we still have housing discrimination, all of which is to say you found that during the Cold War era, there was a massive boom in the white middle class's prosperity, and you just didn't have that among African Americans, not because they weren't meritorious, but because they were discriminated against.
So, let me ask, we're in a very smart college. It's worth pursuing a discussion on these points. So there are Americans whose present benefits are due to past advantage. By the way, this past advantage, which is often assumed to continue with the white man, actually goes all the way back to the beginning. The American Indians who were here first, right, had a huge advantage. We presume that they owned the whole country. Now, by the way, let's pause for a moment. How do you get to own a country? If you have Cain and Abel is a shepherd, and Cain is a farmer, and Cain says, okay, I'm not going to put a fence around the whole world. I own it, because I'm the only guy here. You're a shepherd. And my descendants will now inherit the earth, and anybody who shows up is a usurper. Rousseau says that the first guy who puts up a fence and claims he owns something is a con man. So the American Indians came. They happened to be first. They came in a bunch of tribes. The Navajos who got the land took it from the Hopi or the Pueblo. Their law of the jungle was conquest. That's how they got the land. There's a big fight about the Black Hills that I cover in the film. The Sioux who got the Black Hills took it from the Cheyenne. So when we say, oh, give us the land back, are you going to turn around and give it back to the Cheyenne? Oh, no. It's ours. Really? How come you own it forever now? So what I'm getting at here is history is very complicated. Let me give you an example of India so we can look at this at the level of theory. Okay? India was invaded by the British and earlier by the Afghans and the Persians and the Mongols. So you have all these successive invasions, right? Are you actually saying that you believe in a rule of social justice today that says globally, let's look at this as a global rule of justice. I'm going to figure out whose ancestors did what to whom, and I'm going to return goods that were illicitly taken from the beginning to the people who had it originally. Do you believe that that's a viable way to organize our society? Do you believe, if I can ask you a direct question, that you are the beneficiary of white privilege here at Amherst?
I
yes
do.
Or no?
Well, yeah, and
pause.
Okay.
If you are, can I ask you a further question?
Okay, yeah, but I don't just say it in a I don't say it in a self-flagellating and self-aggrandizing way.
Hold on. Okay, go on.
You know what? I really try not to. I'm simply saying that because you asked me. Really, I view the recognition of one's privilege as an impetus to change things. So I don't just say I have white privilege. I try to help those who have not benefited from such privilege.
How? Hold on. Let's pursue this for a moment. You say, this is actually very important because there's a psychology here, right?
Well, you see, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm really not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to be provocative. I just find that often, I think the essence of much of this discourse surrounds hypocrisy, and you're trying to demonstrate that I'm a hypocrite. I say I benefit from white privilege, yet I don't actually do anything. But I'm gonna backpedal and say that ultimately I think what the greatest vice is cruelty, and I don't want to be hypocritical. So to answer your question, I'll start in high school. Do people want to hear this, or do we?
Educated. Let them know.
Look, let me say where I'm going with this, because I think you're...
All right, well,
too bad.
All of which is to say, it's not like I picked anyone out to help based on the color of their skin, but I was a tutor for people who tended to be low income when I was in high school. I suppose that would be one direct answer to your question, because oftentimes disparate educational opportunities are grounded in disparate economic systems, or systems that produce disparate economic outcomes. So that's one way that I would combat it on an individual level.
All right. Here's what I'm getting with this, okay? One of the benefits of a good education of reading people like Nietzsche is you begin to understand how deep the human desire is for moral self-exculpation. Moral self-exculpation. Now, you say, and I didn't say this, you said this, I'm a beneficiary of illicit white privilege. Okay?
Illicit?
Well, isn't all white privilege illicit? Is it deserved?
Well, in this current system, there is legality.
Illicit means immoral.
Okay. Then
immoral white privilege.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if I were to say to you, there are surely many deserving minorities who would like to come to Amherst but have the inherited disadvantage of American history. Therefore, since you are an acknowledged beneficiary of illicit privilege, would you be willing to step aside voluntarily, putting your own moral mouth where your self-proclaimed virtue is, and give your seat, not my seat. I realize you may be super generous with other people's advantages and favor affirmative action, so other white kids who apply to Amherst are turned away to open spaces for minorities. But I'm not talking about you acting out your virtue on them. I'm talking about you acting out your virtue on you. Are you willing to give up your illicit seat that you don't deserve here at Amherst to make room for a disadvantaged minority? Yes or no?
Okay, well, let me start here. I don't know how you got on the topic of affirmative action.
By following the logic of your...
No, I never said specifically that I think that race-based affirmative action is the best way to rectify the systems of injustice that...
Why don't you practice it by stepping out? And why don't you go to the registrar tomorrow and tell him you want to withdraw from Amherst?
Are you listening to what he just said to you? Get on.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Think about it.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I mean... Look, I'm only continuing to engage because you continue to engage with me, and I do want to hear other people's questions. But in response to that, again, what you're trying to demonstrate is that everyone's hypocritical. As someone once said, that we're all dirty up to our arms, right? We're not all perfect. None of us is perfectly morally consistent. Now, I've said absolutely nothing about affirmative action. The fact is that I believe everyone in this room is hypocritical to some degree. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for a more just and equitable system entirely. There have been points in my life in which I have given up some of the privileges with which I have been endowed simply because I realized that it wasn't the right thing to do. At the same time, I think everyone needs to survive, and that we understand that we exist in an imperfect system, and that we have to conduct our business in such a way as to not only adhere to our moral standards, but to the standards imposed upon us by the system in which we live. And I think that we have to be generous to people in their efforts to not be hypocritical and to do their best. But I don't think that we should totally throw away the idea that we shouldn't have those standards at all. So that's my response to you, but I would still like a response to my question regarding the inequity that I talked about with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. That is wealth that is passed down, and it's documentable wealth. The same way that the wealth created, or the wealth stolen as a product of slavery, was also documentable wealth. We have numbers that demonstrate precisely how much wealth was stolen, and that's money that in some way could be given back. Now, if we're saying that it's absolutely impossible to give that money back because it's too hard to trace, we'd have to give money to the African tribes, we'd have to give money to people who no longer exist. That's absolutely fine, but we have to understand that we haven't really come to terms with that injustice that's been perpetrated, and if we are admitting that no one is perfectly entitled to absolutely everything that their ancestors had stolen from them, then we also have to accept that there are people today who benefit from the fact that their parents and grandparents profited from this immoral system. And the way to deal with that is with a social safety net that enables everyone to thrive. I'll leave you there.
Yes. Well... The core of the American system, this will actually answers your question directly, is that what do we do about the conquest ethic of the past? And here there are two options. There are two options. One option is we establish equal rights under the law. That was the solution of the civil rights movement, that we have had race-based discrimination, we've had racial hierarchy. Let's stop. Let's treat people according to the color of according to the content of their character. Equal rights under the law. Equal rights under the law. The other option, which you're defending, is you could essentially call it, let's correct for history. Let's correct for history. Let's try to find out who are the people in possession of stolen goods, and let's return it. Now, the first thing I'm trying to say is, this is a hugely controversial principle because it actually involves wrecking the freedom of a free society. You basically have to put it frankly, if we were to carry that out, go into people's homes and take their stuff. Take their furniture, take their cars. You don't seem to have even the guts to do that. You don't have the moral self-confidence to do it yourself. It may be, if I am advocating a rule of social justice and I'm advocating it for the whole society, before I persuade everybody else, let's say I'm a Christian and I believe everybody should give 10% of their wealth to help the poor. And I go, you know what? The Bible says this, the Bible says that, everybody should give 10% of their wealth to help the poor. And somebody says, Dinesh, are you giving 10% of your wealth? And I'm like, actually no, but I did do some tutoring. And you go, wait a minute, aren't you advocating, aren't you saying that there is a moral duty to do this? Why don't you do it? Before you convince us, you do it. And you're like, I don't think I should do it because society is extremely complex, and I don't think I should do it unless everybody else does it. No. Either you believe in it and you do it. Once you've done it, you might impress us. And then you might convince the rest of us that our wealth is also ill-gotten. But you can't do it. And I'm not trying to indict everybody of hypocrisy, only you. Because you're the one who said, I'm the beneficiary of illicit privilege. So you're a really good starting point, because I'm asking, if you're in possession of stolen goods, why aren't you willing to return them? So that's why fundamentally I see your charity. You know, during the Civil War, there was a guy who goes, I'm very happy to give, I've given 3 cousins to the war and I'm ready to sacrifice my wife's brother. That's basically your ethics. You're willing to have social justice if other people pay, but you're not willing to pay. So that's the problem. And that's the problem with the progressivism that marches behind social justice while protecting its own privileges. You know how you said, we all have to survive. Really? You have to be at Amherst to survive? You don't have to be at Amherst to survive. You have to be at Amherst to benefit. You have to be at Amherst because you're getting opportunities at this college that many other people are not getting. So if you say you believe in equal opportunity, you're a hypocrite. Because you are taking advantage of opportunities unavailable to others. But for you, this hypocrisy is fully justified because you are militating on behalf of the poor. But if you are against privilege, this college is privilege. So there's a glaring hypocrisy, and you will never turn your moral mirror on yourself to say, what am I doing about it? That's my point. For you, society should act before you do, to enforce your moral code. Let's take a couple more questions.
N3 Radio is a non-profit teaching platform for non-professionals. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or professional use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Get lost in the notes of the Jazzlands with me, your host, RC, every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, only here on N3 Radio.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Catch a ride on the wave with the best in retro wave music beginning at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday with your host Robert here on N3 Radio and at n3radio.com.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. Five seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving. Make sure you get where you're going.
Join your host, DJ Kenny Starr, every night at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific for Bang Your Head for the best mashup of hip-hop and rap only on n3radio.com.
when friends don't stop friends from drinking and driving. Friends die from drinking and driving. Friends die from drinking and driving can kill a friendship.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
N3 Radio in the mix.